Stacy Rothgeb, MBA student at the University of Denver. I'm talking about the session, The Ecosystem Paradigm, Thriving Future Tools. The session did not end up being what I thought it was when I went in there. I was thinking that we were going to talk about like systems thinking, maybe when you're talking about an ecosystem. And the speakers, like one of the speakers was Shel Kimmin with Ford Motor Company. So really I was, again, looking for systems thinking about what Ford is doing to look towards the future and how they're preparing for it. Maybe talking about EVs, maybe talking about alternate transportation, just by their description. She was paired up with Neil Redding with Redding Futures, and this is a self-proclaimed futurist, but very much an ideas guy is how I would describe him. So the first thing I will say is that the presentation style was like nothing I had experienced in a conference before. I actually thought it was kind of fabulous when we started off, talk about a good hook to get you in, and it was that Shel was off stage, and so she was talking and like storytelling in this very soft voice from outside, and the idea was it was giving that impression that you need to erase what you see, because we're going to be talking about almost an alternate reality, but it's like, don't be confined by what is right in front of you, think outside of it. And they kind of did this play back and forth where it was scripted, but well rehearsed and performed, almost like a play or something for the first 30 minutes of this talk. Anyway, the point is they were talking about the paradigm of distinction. Like, what does the need to distinguish create? Why does the need to distinguish create unrest? And it was kind of a poke at civilization where we aren't collaborative. Really, it's like we're groomed from childhood to make everyone feel unique, and maybe that's it was kind of not really pointing fingers of right or wrong, but like, is it better to be unique, or is it better to be part of the ecosystem, part of the whole, part of the connection? And I think some of their position was that to really advance as a society, we need to prioritize connection with the rest of society, with the rest of humanity over distinction. And so what made this presentation also really unique, I was halfway through and I still didn't know the point of it. So that wasn't, there was more learning in their presentation style than anything. But what they had done is used the Mac Journey or whatever, the AI generated photos, artwork for everything in it. So like every time they wanted to make a point in their presentation, they used those AI generated photos and what it came up as. And it was just talking about it again, where it's like, the connection to connectivity was the idea that as a society, we have programmed AI to think a certain way. It's much like we program our children to think in a certain way. So if we're not satisfied with what AI is spitting out, it's because we have programmed it and taught it. Program is not the right word for AI, but we have taught it to be a certain way. So that was very interesting. And it talked about the abundance of the operating system and the interconnectedness of society. So again, all this is that connectivity is better than distinction. We did talk about some of the fear of silence. And so there was this meditation moment about halfway through the presentation where they wanted us to be silent. And I'm still kind of unclear of what the connection was, but going back to the value of the presentation, it's like a large portion of the room left. Interestingly enough, the demographic was mostly middle-aged men, white men, which makes me think that, it's an example of not reading your audience well. Because, if I was up there presenting and I saw this happen, I'd be like, well, one of two directions. Either, they're not my audience, so it's okay that they left. Or I would be like, I need to adjust a little bit because my audience is not getting my message if they're getting up and leaving. The irony is, I think there was some really good content in there, and in the summary I'll throw out some of the graphics, but talking about like what creates churn and assumptions around distinction, and so they were saying what creates churn is that we've incentivized distinction too much, and so there's always this push-pull, and if you start getting a better collective thought, then you'll have less churn. They did allude to that Ford has this corporate culture that is very much based in psychological safety. Therefore, that goes back to that collectiveness. Again, it was the presentation was so far out there that it was kind of, they threw out these things and I was like, that's great, but I don't see how it relates back. Some big takeaways I would think from this is, one is that, again, the need to create and protect space for creativity and connectedness. That's how you're going to get to this end message that they had. And again, AI is learning from us. So our behaviors, AI is not this overarching thing that's going to save us because it's smarter than us, because in the end we're just teaching it. So we need to be careful of our behaviors so that we are actually teaching it where we want to be, and not locking ourselves into repeating a pattern that is not as productive as we want it to be, or does not incentivize what we want our values to be going in the future. Overall, it was unique, and that was some of my goal here, is to see new things, and it was definitely different than anything I'd seen. So mission accomplished.